And at 10, Clara Afton. Okay, let's talk about the big one first, even if I don't like it. Clara is a character from The Immortal and the Restless, a TV show from the FNAF universe featured after every night in sister location. The soap opera features two characters named Vlad and Clara, and their son. Vlad is a vampire and wears a purple suit, linking him to William, and Clara is just a normal girl who had his baby. Vlad keeps claiming that the baby isn't his, even though it can literally turn into a bat. Clara, the baby isn't mine. Thanks to the comparison between Vlad and William, everyone thought that Scott was confirming the name of William's wife, or the mother of his children, as Clara. This doesn't really make sense to me, because like why would William stand in and be called Vlad, but the mother have the same name as her TV character? But also it doesn't seem like it's meant to be the mother. Sure, it makes sense, but Clara in the show then goes on to burn down Vlad's house. To me, this is meant to represent William and Henry, the creators of Fazbear Entertainment, the founders of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Vlad is William, who is denying his responsibilities with the company represented by his vampire son. And Clara is meant to be Henry, trying to get him to put in some work instead of being so secretive and then burning down his house, which would represent Fazbear Fright, since Henry had burnt down multiple establishments in an attempt to kill William. At least, that's what it seemed to me. And at 9, a terrible fate. This was brought up by MatPat in a video a long time ago. Basically how every Afton will receive a terrible fate, some even worse than death, and you know what? It's pretty true. Let's start with the mother of his children. She's gone. We don't know if she died or if she just abandoned the family, or maybe she figured out what William was capable of doing before he even did it. But she isn't around and is most likely dead. Then Emily, the daughter of William, taken by Baby and ended up possessing the body of the animatronic until it burns away in FNAF 6. Then Crying Child, who gets chomped by Fredbear in 1983 and is told that he will be put back together, but from what we know so far, he isn't. Next we have Michael, who ends up getting his insides removed by a scooping machine and then having Ennard use him as a meat suit. Let it be known that this is also including his baby sister, because she was still possessing Baby, meaning that his sister is wearing him like a three-piece suit on the way to a courtroom. And finally, William, the one who lasted the longest. Not typically something men do. He, despite all of his efforts, bites the dust between FNAF 6 and Help Wanted, presumably just after Ultimate Custom Night. But then he possesses a hard drive and then gets scanned into the Freddy Fazbear virtual experience. Damn, this theory turned out to be true, and that's pretty freaking nuts. And today, Baby Mama. Another theory about the identity of the mysterious Mrs. Afton is that there really isn't a Mrs. Afton. Only a baby mama for the kids that abandoned them and left them with their father because she never really wanted children, or were worried that they would turn out like their father. Or she could have been in their life for a while but then had an accident, or maybe had to move out for work and William couldn't leave because of his business. There are more ways to have a family than just married parents. So the idea that the kids didn't have or didn't know their mother is entirely plausible. It could be that William had donated some of his progeny to earn some money to help buy the character of Freddy Fazbear, and those kids were what came of that donation. But then he ended up getting them somehow. I don't know if semantics. There is no guarantee, and honestly that's what I like about this series. Sure, it would have been in the 80s when they would have had their kids, and slightly before, but that doesn't mean that they can't reject social norms. And 7, adoption. Even more so, the kids just may not be his at all. If the child from The Immortal and the Restless is supposed to be a representation of his kids, the kids we all think are his because they turn into a bat or live with him and are disciplined by him could just be adopted, as he keeps saying, the baby isn't mine. William could have simply adopted those children. It would be difficult as a single father to do so, but he owns a successful company so he could easily provide. He also could have a son already, hence why Michael makes fun of and is mean to the Crying Child. We don't know if Emily or Crying Child was born first. They could be twins and are the same age, and William or the adoption agency didn't want to split them up. You know, I mean, it's probably the adoption agency. And at 6, kidnapping. Or I mean, if we're being totally honest, William could have just kidnapped them in order to experiment on them, or make them easier to kill. But then he grew attached to them enough that he told them to stay away from the animatronics, which they obviously didn't end up listening to. The whole idea of possession, however, I don't think came across William's mind until he saw that Elizabeth had possessed Baby. Up until that point, he was probably just killing for the hell of it. Or maybe he started to get Henry to be in so much pain that he had to step away from the company. People have killed for less, so William killing to get control of a business, to push it in a specific direction, or to sell it off so circus babies could work out, that's entirely plausible. He could have kidnapped them because he wanted to seem more innocent, or maybe just so he had an alibi for when he was out slaughtering kids for sport. Halfway through at number 5, cheating. There is another explanation for The Immortal and the Restless that I also find quite interesting. What if it's meant to be William Afton and Henry's wife? If it was meant to be Henry's wife, it would explain William's reluctance to accept that the baby is his, despite it clearly being his, and would explain where his wife went as well, and why we've never heard anything about Charlotte's mother. Both families would have gotten divorced, and it would explain why Vlad and Clara in the end do end up getting back together. Clara may not be William's wife's name, but it could be Henry's wife's name. It would also give William a motive for killing, specifically killing Charlotte. Maybe Charlotte was the last thing keeping Clara from leaving Henry, and without her they could be together. But then William got a taste for it, for taking lives. It would also explain Laura's song. Why would he shut himself away from his own wife when they lose a child? And the way the song goes doesn't sound like it's sung from the perspective of someone who lost a kid. She said it's so good to sing all day, to dance, to spin, to fly away. Why would someone who just lost a kid be singing, dancing, and spinning? I've seen how it affects people, and they weren't singing. This could be Henry's wife trying to get William away from his troubles by going on a trip, by flying away. This explains quite a lot, and it makes a load of sense. And for resurrection. The Afton family is a complicated bunch. They've all suffered terrible fates, and now they've all in some way been resurrected. Let's go over the evidence. William Afton gets spring-locked and is presumed dead, but he isn't. He survived and is now spring-trapped. That's a form of resurrection. 2. He does finally die in FNAF Ultimate Custom Night, but then is scanned into Help Wanted, thus bringing him back again. And in Security Breach, that arm at the end of the gameplay trailer is very clearly meant to be his, suggesting that he will be fully resurrected in that game. If not, he was still resurrected by taking over Vanessa's mind and making another damn furry suit to kill him. That's another form of resurrection. The others are more simple than that. Mrs. Afton is presumably brought back in the form of an animatronic called Ballora, having the animatronic be made in her image and not possessed. There is no evidence of that. William brought her back as a robot without actually making her possessed. He just created her using her idea. Michael was killed by the scooper, but brought back as Ennard, and then himself again after Ennard ejects himself out of the skin suit. It's weird. Emily possesses baby after getting killed by her, and the crying child could have been brought back by, and number 3, crying Foxy Bro. I have a whole video on this theory if you'd like to check it out. It's up in the top right corner, because this is kind of complicated. At the end of FNAF 4, Crying Child dies, and when this happens, we will see William tell him that he will put him back together. Nothing really comes of this line though, at least from what we're told. But if you look at it, Crying Child could have been brought back as the character we know as Michael, or Foxy Bro to some. Michael seems to always be around Crying Child, and it's the only time that we see him in memories, around Crying Child. In the original FNAF novel series, the main character known as Charlie is revealed to be one in a series of robots that were made after she was killed early on in her life. That same idea could be what William did to Crying Child, but instead of making memories about Crying Child, he gave him new ones. Ones that made him believe that he was responsible for his little brother's death, and that would make him stay away from the Fazbear restaurants forever. Of course, until his father makes him go to Sister Location, which isn't really even a Fazbear location, to meet his sister, who knows that he is a robot, hence why she says he won't die, even when getting scooped. A machine that has only been known to scoop robotic parts out of animatronic shells. We don't see any blood on the scooper when it attacks us, our vision only goes red. I really think that this could be where Scott is going. Matt had originally thought so as well, saying that Crying Child could have been brought back as a robot. And if you want a further explanation, the link is in the iCard. And at 2, Reunited. I was gonna sing, but that would get us demonetized. The Afton family has been separated for a while, thanks to, death and taxes. But what if the goal of Security Breach is to bring them all back together? At least, maybe symbolically. This is a wild one, but it's still fun to consider. William is back in the form of Vanny, since he has taken over Vanessa, and will later on most likely get his body back, or at least a body of his own. Next, we have Vanessa herself, who could be some form of relative of the Afton family, or maybe even the mother. It would be insane, I know, but remember, William was working on a solution to aging, or the key to immortality, so it's plausible. If not, she could also be the adult robot version of Elizabeth, the daughter taken by Baby. In the books, Baby is able to transform between looking extremely realistically human and looking like a circus clown thanks to the pins we see on her in Sister Location as well, so it's not as far-fetched as you might assume. Gregory, the child we play as, could very well be the Crying Child as a robot, or at least a representation of the Crying Child. And Glamrock Freddy is obviously the big brother Michael, protecting Gregory by letting him hide inside his chest. Wait, if we keep going with that, could Gregory hiding inside of Glamrock Freddy be Scott showing us that Crying Child was inside Michael, basically confirming my theory? I may have to make another part to that theory with all the new evidence. And like a conspiracy board like what I did for the top 10 reasons Clara is Clara Afton in the background. Did you notice that? Yeah. Finally, in number 1, robots. Every single one of the Afton family members was made into some form of robot, whether it be them possessing a robot or having one made in their image. Let's start with Elizabeth, who becomes a robot when she possesses Circus Baby after being scooped. And then we have Michael, who even if he wasn't a robot version of the crying child, is scooped and gets his insides replaced with robot parts. But Laura is made in the image of William Afton's baby mama or wife, letting her become in essence a robot even if not through possession. William becomes spring-trapped after getting spring-locked, which while not killing him does make him part robot, and now in Security Breach he'll have to be a full robot in order to return to the land of the living. And then finally we have the crying child. If we go with the idea that I'm wrong about him being put back together, he's a tricky one to place as a robot. He gets killed as a person and then fights for his life in a coma in the hospital, right? That's who we play as in FNAF 4. That's why we see flowers, meds, and an IV in the corner next to our bed. But it's in those small details where we can find out why Crying Child became a robot. Life support. While in a coma, you're not really able to do anything. You're unconscious, unable to eat or drink, hence the IV. It's also not uncommon for coma patients to be on life support since they can't really do anything for themselves. Crying Child would most likely have to be on life support, especially because of his younger age.
Number 10, Crying Child's fate. Possibly Evan's fate would be an appropriate title of this as well, assuming that Evan is actually the true name for CC. Crying Child meets a terrifying end. This poor victim, and likely also offspring of William Afton's, ends up having his birthday at Fredbear's and is seemingly tormented by his older brother during it. Though really why Crying Child is such a fan of Fredbear's when the animatronics terrify him, I don't really get that. But I guess that's also a lot of the FNAF fanbase, who like to be scared, so maybe CC is scared too but is also a fan? I don't know. Either way, Crying Child's brother decides the best way to tease him is to take him up to the stage and lift him up to give Fredbear a big kiss. His brother and his friends stick CC's head in the animatronic, but something goes awfully wrong, and the animatronic bear chomps down on CC's head, crushing it. While CC does survive the accident, he never fully recovers and shortly after dies as a result of his injuries. Number 9, Elizabeth's fate. Elizabeth probably is one of the saddest stories of all of the Afton family members. When she was young, all she wanted to do was play with Circus Baby, the animatronic that her father had supposedly made for her. Unfortunately, this didn't end up working out. Well, it kinda did work out, but not in a good way. William told her both that he'd made the animatronic for her, but also that she should be cautious around it and that she would need to keep her distance. Kinda some contradicting stuff there, Mr. Afton. In the end, Elizabeth snuck off to play with Circus Baby, being lured away from the group by ice cream. She then ended up being devoured by the animatronic. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists on the Afton family and all of the mysteries within the Afton family, because there are many, please be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. I love diving into all the mysteries and all the horrors. Number 8, Circus Baby. After her death at the hands of Circus Baby, Elizabeth would actually become one with the animatronic, with her soul possessing it and going on to live within that animatronic. Elizabeth's soul would then become trapped within Circus Baby. In Sister Location, it seemed as though the knowledge of his sister's fate was what inspired Michael Afton to get a job at the underground facility, in hopes of freeing her. It's unclear whether Michael was doing this of his own volition, or whether he was compelled to do so by his father William. Number 7, Michael failed. In the end, Michael failed his mission though to free his sister's spirit. There is an ending where he escapes the facility and his true fate, but we'd also learn that the real ending involved him being harmed simply because he came to try and free his sister. Oh no, just I guess kind of like a wrong place, wrong time scenario. In the ending where you as Michael do survive and get away, it's implied that Circus Baby knows the reason why Michael has come, and actually attempts to bait him from leaving his safe room in order to confront her and attempt to fulfill his mission to save his sister. Either way that you finish the game though, the fact remains that Michael failed to save Elizabeth, who still is trapped within Baby, or I guess what's left of her, by the end of the game. Number 6, Michael's fate. Michael doesn't just fail at being unable to save his sister, but he also potentially loses his own life in the process. Unless of course he was an animatronic the whole time. which could be very well possible at this point. The true ending of Sister Location finished with Michael getting scooped by Ennard and having his insides replaced by the amalgamation of Sister Location animatronics, who now occupy that endoskeleton, Ennard. This is how they are able to escape the facility, through Michael. Although Michael seemingly still somehow survives this, not really dying on the inside despite being without presumably most, if not all, of his internal organs. He continues walking around as normal until his flesh has rotted, and then he vomits up the parts of the endoskeleton within him, collapsing to the ground, as we can assume there would be really nothing left inside of him to hold him up. Probably didn't even have bones left after that big scoop after all. However, he is somehow revived by Circus Baby's voice, reassuring him that he won't die. You won't die, you won't die. Now, presumably undead, Michael continues on in his life forever changed. Number 5. William's profession. One of the creepiest things about William Afton, just to begin with, is his involvement in these family restaurants featuring live bands made up of animatronics. Live bands. The fact that he even made animatronics, never mind all the weird mad science that goes with that, is disturbing on its own. I mean, these animatronics all look pretty creepy, and I know all the Freddy chains are meant to be like a place of joy and happiness, at least on paper. But these animatronics do not scream joy and happiness to me. They scream terror, they scream at me to like run for the exit. Everything except joy and happiness really is what they're screaming at me. Also, just sometimes they're just screaming at me because they're jump scaring me. Number 4. William's hobby. One of the scariest truths involving the Afton family is William's role as a killer. I PG-13'd it up and referred to it as his hobby in the title of this point because, well, censorship and such, but it seems as though this hobby is quickly becoming more like his true profession. William has killed multiple people at this point for a reason we don't really quite fully understand yet. Though I'm sure he has his reasons, right? I mean, he's gotta have reasons, right? Included in the deaths he's had a hand in, albeit likely not directly, are the deaths of his own offspring. All 3 of his kids, if there are 3, I'm pretty sure there's still 3 either way you slice it. Even if Michael is Evan, there's still gotta be an older sibling, and then there's still Elizabeth, so all 3 of his kids seem to have been taken out by animatronics. Although Michael was also weirdly still alive even after his death following Sister Location, making us wonder just how human he and perhaps his siblings may really be. Maybe they were never human children. Maybe they were all robots. Number 3. Springtrap. Another very dark truth is that William Afton went on to become the monster known as Springtrap. Springtrap is the main antagonist of FNAF 3, where you are a security guard at a sort of haunted house / museum, created to profit off of the terrible and tragic events that seem to destroy Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and seemingly the reputation of Fazbear Entertainment's reputation besides. William Afton was chased by the spirits of his victims who had come to possess the animatronic suits. He chose to hide in a spring-lock Bonnie suit, but water coming into contact with it caused the spring locks to loosen, malfunction, and they tore through William's organs and body, presumably, trapping him within the suit and in theory killing him. Though of course he seems pretty lively in FNAF 3 as the only true and physical antagonist. And I believe that's after 30 years of him being like sort of locked away, so I guess he's like a spirit possessing the animatronic, or he's still alive. I have a lot of questions. Number 2. Stitchwraith. When you really think about it, William was even involved in the creation of Stitchwraith, which is pretty astounding and also horrifying. According to the Fazbear Frights book, William was the one responsible for Andrew's death, and Andrew is one of the souls who would go on to possess or become the Stitchwraith. Initially, Andrew tied himself to William, preventing him from dying in an attempt to torment him. You'd think making your killer immortal would kind of be a bad idea, but I guess Andrew's whole thing was more selfish, not really caring about preventing any further killings or deaths, more wanting to make sure that William lived on so that William could suffer ever more. We learn of Andrew's story in The Man in the Room 1280 from the 5th Fazbear Frights book, Bunny Call. Number 1. Immortal William. Despite the fact that William has seemingly died multiple times, it appears that he must somehow be immortal. Whether that's thanks to Andrew, even after Andrew left him, or is something that William did to himself, or is perhaps just a coincidence. Every time William seemingly dies in the FNAF series, he comes back. He's as resilient as Michael Myers at this point. He just dies and he keeps coming back no matter what. He's been spring-locked, burned alive in a building twice, the second time around seemingly locked up and unable to escape, and yet now he is back as Glitchtrap. This time he has returned through someone scanning a barcode from a Spring Bonnie suit that I suppose he still somehow possessed in some capacity, as it downloaded his spirit, his soul, or his essence into the game, allowing William to live once more. I'm telling you, if you ever think William has finally died, do not believe it, because he hasn't.
In a 10 soap opera. One fun fact about Michael Afton, actually I don't know if this is fun or if we should actually be afraid, is that he loves the soap opera The Immortal and the Restless, a vampire parody of The Young and the Restless, and I'm assuming Twilight maybe, because of the vampires. I don't actually know where Scott stands on the franchise. Anyway, I'm not sure if we should be amused by his constant watching of the show or afraid, since him watching that show keeps his attention so bad that he doesn't hear Ennard come into his house, and he's just able to crawl in front of the TV while Michael just sits there. No running, no surprise, he just sits there watching Immortal and the Restless. People also seem to think that this is alluding to Michael's relationship with William, saying potentially that the child isn't his. I mean, that is a possibility, but what if it's true, and when William found out he killed the mother, hence why she isn't around? But that doesn't really make any sense, because if he was willing to kill the mother, he wouldn't have kept the kid. Either way, the way Michael gets distracted by a soap opera is scary. Not because it's a soap opera, because he's so distracted he doesn't hear a 7-foot-tall animatronic walking into his house. In a 9 torn identity. Michael, while not going by many names, has had many different identities over the years. While now most of us know who he is, there is a whole section of the community that thinks that Mike is Springtrap. Hell, according to the security logbook, Michael may not even be his real name. Over the years, Michael has gone by Foxy Bro, Crying Child, Purple Guy, Springtrap, and Mike Trap, but they have all been Michael Afton. We don't know why he may not remember his name, and we may not know for certain what's really going on in this series, but I can tell you that 100% he is not Springtrap, okay? Mike Trap is not a thing. Scott Cawthon confirmed it himself in reference to a MatPat theory about FNAF 6, saying to pay attention to his take on the Mike Trap versus Will Trap debate, and Matt did in fact prove to us that Mike Trap is impossible, since when Purple Guy was first introduced in FNAF 2, he had been able to drive since Fredbear's Family Diner, which Mike would 100% not have been old enough to do. Plus, if it was Mike in the Springtrap costume, he wouldn't have been able to set the souls of the other children free like he was doing, because he would have been trapped in the safe room. In an 8 mirror image. We learned from Mike's final monologue in Sister Location that Mike actually looks a lot like his father, saying the animatronics didn't recognize him at first, but then they thought that Mike was William, which explains why the animatronics are coming to kill us in the games and why the toy animatronics come after us in FNAF 2. Because we play as Mike in all those games. Because since now they have William as a killer and they're all looking for him, but instead they find us, his son, Michael Afton, which kind of throws out the whole we aren't his son thing, unless you think about the crying child as the one who isn't the son. But in that case he wouldn't say I'll put you back together, even though he could be someone else who says that, and who knows anymore. Not even MatPat, and we rely on MatPat to get these things right. At least I do. I rely on it. Notice me, senpai. Just comment in all the game theories. Tell him to check out Top 10 Gaming. Love you, MatPat. Don't copyright strike me. And at 7, moral differences. Now, while William and Mike may look alike, that's the only thing they have in common. Genetics aside, these people aren't related in the slightest. If you think about it, these two are the opposites of each other. One is corrupt and kills as a sacred nature, and the other is trying to repent, making up for his father's crimes as well as his own wrongdoings. We don't know why William started killing, it's all just speculation, but we know why Mike began hunting down the spirits of the children and started setting them free, to make up for his father's mistakes and to let his brother have the peace he deserves. The two characters juxtapose each other, and this is even more reinforced when you remember that they did look exactly alike, so much so that the animatronics actively try to enact revenge on Mike, thinking that he's William. Even though they look identical, they are on the opposite sides of the spectrum of human decency. And while yes, Mike started off bullying his younger brother, once he got his brother killed, that's when he found his way. It's sad, but at least they can rest now. And at 6, he can't die. It's established in Sister Location that Mike isn't able to die via any normal means. When he got scooped and injected with Remnant, as explained via the Remnant reservoir that the scooper has, and thanks to Baby telling him he won't die after Ennard escapes his now rotting body. However, even though he is rotting, smelling disgusting, and becoming more ghastly every day, he's still kicking. Or at least he was, until Pizzeria Simulator. Now, how is this? Well, it's thanks to the Remnant in his body. The Remnant that he was injected with in Sister Location's final moments actually saved his life. His body was dead, but his soul was still preserved, infusing him with a form of soul metal powered by agony that can only be destroyed with fire, or overheating. And you may be thinking, if he was injected with Remnant, doesn't that make his body possessed by a soul that isn't his? And while this would be true for anyone else, scooping would be incredibly painful and cause an intense amount of agonizing pain. But you also need to remember, he's with his dead family. He just found out that his sister possessed the Circus baby animatronic, and his brother, probably fairly recently, just got killed by the springlock failure. So he's dealing with a whole lot, to say the least, and to say that he's in agony is probably an understatement. So it's very possible that he infused his soul with the Remnant injected and just took control. That's not that far out there when it comes to this series. Halfway through and in number 5, Burned. However, despite his ultimate soul power, he eventually does die during the fire in FNAF 6, also known as Pizzeria Simulator, where Henry gives his final monologue to close out the first 6 games, or the Purple Guy saga, or at least we thought. We then see him return in the form of Glitchtrap in FNAF VR, but that's a whole other video. And literally, we did a top 10 scary Glitchtrap facts, so you should go check that out too. After this, of course. But as I described my last number, the only way he could die was through burning, which Henry makes sure of when he burns the joint to the ground with William, Baby aka Elizabeth, Molten Freddy aka Ennard, Lefty containing the puppet aka Charlotte, Henry's daughter, and you playing as Mike inside. The only question I have about this is, did we know we were gonna burn down? Obviously, we wouldn't be talking about it outright with Henry since, you know, arson is illegal, and if anyone were to stumble upon their operation, special obligations under paragraph 4 sounds better than you found an animatronic we need to burn. Especially when you take into account that these animatronics are possessed and have minds of their own. They don't want to be destroyed. So it would make sense as to why they'd keep it secret, but it could be Henry keeping secrets from us as well. I personally always thought that we knew that we were gonna burn and that we had just accepted it because we'd get to see our family again and they'd be put to rest. Also because, you know, we're a walking hunk of rotting flesh that was used as a meat suit for a robotic endoskeleton, and I don't think there's a therapy for that. In at 4, Scooped. We all know that Mike got scooped at the end of Sister Location, if you got the right ending. However, what we probably didn't know, at least until FNAF 6, is how the scooper worked. The scooper has 4 different parts to it. The excavating arm, which is the worst name for a scooper imaginable, the Remnant injector that leaves a trace line of Remnant on the interior of the subject, the arm, base, and balance, and the Remnant reservoir. And this blueprint is also where we learn that negating the effects of Remnant requires heat. In the notes it says that when heated, the metal has no observable motion, that the heated tank should be kept at a sustaining temperature that makes the metal malleable, but nothing more liquid than that, because overheating might neutralize the effects permanently, as well as using the scooper too much. As the notes on the injector says, overusage/overexposure negates the effects. If Mike had scooped Ennard out of him, he might have just been able to die instead of living in agony. Getting close to the end in number 3, he killed his brother. This is a fairly obvious thing, but this is also one of the most horrifying things imaginable. I wouldn't be able to handle directly being the cause of a family member's death. If I was Mike and I had put my brother into the jaws of a creature he was so terrified of that he started crying so much the jaws closed and crushed his skull, I wouldn't be able to handle it. I wouldn't have been okay ever again, okay? Just the thought of this makes me want to hug my sister. Sure, her and I fight and yeah, I pick on her, but there's no way that I would have forced her into a terrifying situation unless it was for YouTube content and she was willing. But by no means would I throw her into the mouth of anything. I was going to make a joke and say aside from a lion, but I can't even joke about that. That sucks. In at 2, Purple Guy. Remember how I mentioned earlier that people thought Mike was the killer? Well, that's because of Scott's old tricks. In the final scenes of Sister Location, where we see Mike walking along after his Ennard injection, we see him slowly get more purple and start to collapse, until eventually he is pure purple and so broken that Ennard has to evacuate faster than your Tinder date. He stood up after Baby said multiple times that he won't die, but this has caused a whole bunch of people to believe that he is actually the purple guy, that he is the killer. This is simply not the case. Yes, there are 2 purple guys, but only one of them is actually physically purple, that being Mike. Mike is actually purple, even though being green would make more sense because that's what everything rotten is colored, but whatever, Scott. William is the one and only purple guy, but he is purple because that's meant to represent a shadow in minigames that have a black background. And in Atari-style games, purple was used to indicate shadows because in a way it's more realistic in some cases. It's hard to explain. They aren't the same person, I promise. Okay, as I said earlier, Scott confirmed it himself. Finally, in at number 1, he's the brother. Hey, brother. Now I've been talking this whole time about how Michael is the big brother, and some of you may be confused. At first we thought he was the brother until the survival logbook gave us questions like, does he still talk to you, in reference to psychic friend Fredbear, and lines like the party was for you. Since the crying child's party is where he ended up dying, we thought that Mike was actually the crying child, and the promise of I will put you back together came from William, who literally put him back together as a robot. But now we're back to his brother. Why? Actually, it's because of the latest Fazbear Frights book and the similarities between the main character of Paul from one of the stories and Foxy Bro, as MatPat called him. If you haven't watched that theory, I highly suggest you do. Matt will explain it better than I can in this short amount of time because the script is already really damn long. But basically, the similarities prove that Mike is actually the gray-shirted big brother. But honestly, I think that the two kids may be the same person, but that's something I'll have to discuss on my own stuff.
In a 10 surrogate mother. Plenty of members of the FNAF community lean towards the idea that Ballora, an animatronic introduced in Sister Location, was an attempt at recreating a mother figure for William's children, hence her motherly features, her mini-renas, and her song, which we also believe is meant to represent a woman who William was blocking out or ran away from in the aftermath of his children's deaths. Some also believe the animatronic to be possessed by the spirit of the mother of the Afton kids, who either died in a car accident, as one unofficial music video suggested, or via brutal murder at the hands of her husband after discovering his evil deeds. It could also have been that the death of his wife started William to killing. However, we know that Ballora is most likely not possessed by the mother thanks to the novels, where it's revealed that the Funtime animatronics were made using the remnant of the original 5 animatronics, which contained the souls of Jeremy, Fritz, Susie, Gabriel, and Cassidy. So there wouldn't really be enough room for the soul of a mother who would have had to die after the animatronics were created, which would be after the missing children's incident. Yeah. And at 9, Witness. The unfortunate scooping of Elizabeth Afton is really what ended up changing William's motives. At least we think so, since in the novels once he sees the original animatronics possessed, his goal changes to search for eternal life and making himself immortal. But in the games, could it have been that the baby scooping is what changed him? I mean, it would make sense, especially with the fact that Crying Child, one of William's other kids, may have seen it happen. It would explain a lot if Crying Child did indeed see the scooping, the stomach mouths on the nightmare animatronics, William keeping an eye on him using cameras and stuffed animals with security cameras and speakers inside, and this could be the moment that William learns about possession and that somehow his daughter was kept alive inside the animatronic, hence why he says I will put you back together when his son is dying after pulling the plug. He thinks that he can save him like how his daughter stays alive in Baby. Little does he know that you need agony to allow for possession, which only happens at the moment of death, not after. And at 8, Mustard Man. The most confusing part of FNAF 6 has got to be the fan name Mustard Man from the Midnight Motorist minigame. No character until this point has been identified with the color orange. It was even made explicitly clear in the Freddy Files Updated Edition book that your character in the minigame is orange, not purple, which leads me to believe that maybe this scene is more than we originally thought. Now, there are 2 groups of people for this character. One group that believes that this is William Afton before Remnant injections or something like that, before becoming the shadow of the man he once was, and the other thinks that this could in fact be Henry Emily, the father of Charlotte, in the security puppet minigame from that same game, which could also help support this theory. There isn't really much to go off of, only that this may be William because of the 2 sons, one watching TV wearing a gray shirt like Mike from the FNAF 4 minigames, who goes home to watch Immortal and the Restless after work in Sister Location, and the similarity of the Mustard Man color with the I will put you back together color text from FNAF 4. But it may also be Henry's home because of the footprints outside the window, which look an awful lot like Glitchtrap's feet, although this could just be a twisted animatronic or something similar. Yet we never heard about Henry having more kids than Charlotte, not even in the novels, so
I don't know. What side are you on? Are you on Team Afton or Team Emily? Let me know in the comments. And at 7, intentional. There is no doubt that the Circus baby animatronic was made to scoop and grab kids, hence why William warned his daughter and son to stay away from it. But of course, like children do, that only made them want to see her more, at least in Elizabeth's case. And William should have known that. He would have had to know that his kids wouldn't listen and instead get closer, right? Well, maybe he did. Maybe the scooping that took Elizabeth's life was intentional and not a tragic accident after all. I mean, hey, it's possible. Maybe Elizabeth saw something that she didn't quite understand and William didn't want her figuring it out later in life. Or maybe he had a theory about possession before this moment and wanted to test it. Or maybe he wanted to immortalize his daughter in an animatronic that was made specifically for her. I mean, if it was an accident, William would be pissed, and that would send him into a spiral that would have surely gotten him caught. So how did he keep his cool? Because he knew it was going to happen. And at 6, the beginning. The origins of William Afton is something the games have very much left unexplored. Anytime we see an event in this series, it was while William was killing. We never really, to our knowledge at least, see him before he's on his murderous path. So, what gives? What's his origin? Why did he start killing? I mean, at this point we know more about Rick Sanchez, and that's saying something. I mean, he literally started this season of Rick and Morty saying, "Don't establish a canonical backstory with me." Either way, what could have possibly triggered this kind of reaction? Now, I'm no profiler, but my sister watches a lot of Criminal Minds and I've seen all of Bones, so I am nowhere near close to qualified. There could be many things. The death of his wife, divorce, hell, maybe a bad song played on the radio. But while we may not know what it is, we do know what it can't be. We know that the death of his children cannot be the reason he started killing. Since Elizabeth got scooped by Baby, he was built to be a murder robot, and Crying Child saw it happen, hence the nightmare animatronics and the empty girls room in FNAF 4. We know that nothing else happens to these kids as far as we've seen, and we have no idea about the mother or the baby mama of these kids, but maybe there wasn't one to begin with. Halfway through in at number 5, Kidnapping. Now, this is one of Amanda's theories and she seems dead set on it. So what if the Afton kids were kidnapped? What if they were never William's kids to begin with? I mean, it would explain a few things. Why there's no mother, first of all, because while yes, you need to have a female to have a biological child, your kids don't have to be biological. So could William have kidnapped them? Maybe. I mean, he does keep a hell of an eye on them, installing cameras everywhere as evidenced by his psychic friend Fredbear plushes that we can see in basically every screen of the FNAF 4 minigames, and it would also explain the line of "the baby isn't mine" from the Immortal and the Restless, despite the kid looking exactly like his father and even becoming a bat. Like we hear Michael say in his final speech, "They didn't recognize me at first, but then they thought I was you." Michael looks exactly like William, but Vlad kept insisting that the baby isn't mine. Could this be the case with his children? Maybe something to chew on. And at 4, Clara Afton. Speaking of Immortal and the Restless, what about Clara? A seemingly random character that made her first debut as the mother of Vlad's child, and since Vlad was linked to William through the purple blazer... Oh wait. This instantly linked Clara to the never-before-seen mother of his children, especially in a game where they also introduced Ballora, who, as I said earlier, could have been intended to be a surrogate mother. However, the community instantly started calling the mother Clara Afton, and I never liked this. While Clara could very well represent the mother, why would the character on the show share the same name? I mean, William's equivalent in that show is named Vlad, so why would the mother have the same name as her on-screen counterpart? It just makes no sense. Yet people treat the name of Clara Afton as canon. While yes, as humans we crave answers and our minds try to fill in our gaps in knowledge with answers, that's what causes overthinking, there's been no confirmation as far as I know about this. And I'm sure that it would have been mentioned in the Freddy files if it was actually important. Actually, in the Freddy files, it calls Clara his mistress, not his ex or something, putting yet another hole in that oh so popular theory. Also, let's be honest. She's Clara Clayton. Getting close to the end in at number 3, cheating. Now, what if instead the kids weren't kidnapped, but instead illegitimate? Once upon a time, I had a theory that Clara from the Immortal and the Restless didn't represent the wife, but instead Henry's wife, and I had quite a bit of evidence and logic to back it up. In short, Clara is meant to be William's mistress. As I just mentioned, it's in the Freddy files, but Clara seems to share a few similarities with Henry as well. Burning down Vlad's house, which Henry does countless times, well not his house, but you know what I mean, as well as demanding he take more responsibility, which Henry could have been doing in reference to the business. their baby. But ultimately, the baby they have in the show is biological, and his mistress ultimately rejecting him to stay with her husband could have been the stressor William needed to flip his lid, killing kids since they represent why Clara would have stayed with Henry, and then getting the child that actually caused her to stay, Charlotte. And Clara knew that they were in danger, so she told Henry everything, causing him to take precautions for his daughter in the form of the security puppet without making his daughter freak out, letting her still live a normal life while he knew that the puppet would protect her. Well, until it didn't. Penultimately, in at number 2, Mikebot. Michael Afton as a robot has been proposed as an idea since the release of The Fourth Closet, and honestly, to me, it still makes a lot of sense. William could have wanted another son, one that would look just like him instead of the mother, or that didn't come from the woman who broke his heart, or maybe someone to just look after the kids while he went to work, so he made Michael. This is only enhanced by Sister Location, where Michael is somehow able to survive being scooped and stuffed like a Thanksgiving turkey key with Ennard, and then somehow able to survive vomiting it out of his throat. That entire 6'2" hunk of metal being ejected out your throat with no warning, no lube, no spit, just metal tearing through your esophagus. Michael even admits in the final monologue that he should be dead, but he's not, and Baby knew that he wouldn't die. How could this make sense? Honestly, at this point, only if he was a robot. It also explains how Ennard would have been able to put himself inside his body, he wrapped around the endoskeleton, and why he couldn't only die in the FNAF 6 fire. All signs point to Mike being a robot, so what could get any more intense than that? Actually, finally, in at number 1, robots. A whole family of robots, of course. Think about it. Eventually, all of the Afton family members end up becoming robots in some way or another, right? Let's go down the list. Mike was either always a robot or gets controlled by Ennard, who is a robot. Elizabeth gets scooped by Baby and possesses her. William gets spring-locked and becomes Springtrap and later Scraptrap. Crying Child either possesses Golden Freddy or his father, becoming an animatronic through Springtrap while keeping his father alive in that suit. And the mother is represented by Ballora, who also ends up getting shoved into Michael. Also, this whole family dynamic is weird, honestly. Like, they literally made Mike's sister shove herself inside of him. And the whole like ships thing between these characters is wrong. Don't get me started on that. I'm glad I didn't have to make that list. Amanda also thinks that maybe all the Afton kids were robots, but I feel like that's disproven by Elizabeth possessing Baby, unless she was the only actual biological kid. Crying Child Circuit's getting crushed by Freddy makes more sense than his skull though, just saying. And at 10, Clara Afton. The Clara Afton theory is a simple one. The idea that the name of Mrs. Afton, or Afton's baby mama, is Clara. This idea comes from the Between Nights cutscenes from Sister Location, where Michael goes home and watches his favorite series, The Immortal and the Restless, while eating popcorn and potentially exotic butters, which features a vampire wearing a purple suit swearing up and down that the clearly vampire baby isn't mine. And the mother of the child in this scenario is named Clara, which instantly people latched onto and are now adamant about it being the mother's intended name. And while yes, it's certainly possible and is fairly on brand with FNAF logic for lore at least, we haven't really had a name reveal this subtle before in the games. We got the names of the 5 missing kids outright. William was mentioned by name at the beginning of this game. Michael said his name at the end of this game, and I don't think that there's really been any subtle name reveals aside from Cassidy, but that takes place outside of the game series. Plus, the vampire's name is Vlad, not William, which could also easily be a reference to Danny Phantom if you want to play the whole game like that. Like, I don't know, I just don't think that the mother's name is Clara, but it's still a theory. In at 9, the Blob. The Blob is an amalgamation of various animatronics that appears in FNAF Security Breach as a secret antagonist. The Blob's main head has a mask identical to that of Funtime Freddy, but with black eyes. It also appears to be some larger version of Molten Freddy after the Pizza Simulator fire, but with more animatronics than those who were present in that fire, somehow. With parts of Baby, the puppet, which were both there, and then Chica, Mangle, Bonnie, and several Endo Mark IIs. But thanks to the Fazbear Frights books, we may know who this mysterious giant blob is, or was going to be revealed to be. While yes, the game released on December 17th, 2021, that was not the original intent. The original intention was for this game to come out in like 2019, I'm pretty sure. But then various delays and expansions to the game ended up causing the game to come out 2 years later. But those game delays didn't delay anything else, which meant that the Fazbear Frights books kept their schedule, and a similar creature ended up appearing appearing in those books, which was ultimately controlled by Elizabeth Afton, who is possessing Baby. So, could this blob be Elizabeth coming back? Or maybe not, since Baby's eyes aren't lit, and it seems to prefer the face of Funtime Freddy. And it ain't fake hero. Michael Afton is a troublemaker in my mind, alright? Like, sure, he seems to be playing the good guy going after his father, but really, Michael, to me, just seems fairly entitled. Sure, he says he's trying to right his father's wrongs and whatnot, but looking at him, he's not really doing it because he's a good person. He's doing it because he feels bad, and not because of some higher noble purpose. He blames himself for getting his brother killed, which is understandable, but also this subsequently means that anything he does, he's doing to make himself feel better about his mistakes, because in the end, nothing will really bring his little bro back. And he doesn't even really have the gall, the nuts, the cojones to actually stop his father once and for all. He says he's going to come find him, but when he does find him in FNAF 6, he doesn't burn the place to the ground to stop him. Henry's the one who does that. Henry's also the only one willing to sack up and actually try to stop William. And that just shows how not serious Michael is about this. If he really wanted to make sure that William was stopped, he wouldn't have let himself burn in the FNAF 6 fire, okay? But he does. He lets himself burn so that he won't have to feel the regret of hurting his brother and the curse of knowledge since he knows what his father's doing. And it's 7 Golden Freddy. Some people believe that the one possessing Golden Freddy is Crying Child. This is mostly based on the It's Me hallucinations from FNAF 1 and the reveal that the older brother has been our player character over the first 6 games in the series, excluding FNAF 4 and potentially others depending on things that get revealed later on. So why would people believe this? Well, it's because it would explain Golden Freddy's signature line of It's Me. Since if we do play as Michael Afton in the first game, It's Me could just end up being Crying Child trying to communicate with his older brother as to who he is. It could also explain the constant use of the phrase It's Me in the security logbook, since some also believe it to be possessed by the spirit of Golden Freddy, or the 2 spirits inside the book are also those inside Golden Freddy, which makes no sense to me because why would 2 people be possessing multiple things and the same 2 things at that? Anyway, with the line of It's Me being explained easily with the Crying Child being Golden Freddy, it leads to some to the conclusion that that must be the way Scott intended it, but hey, what do I know? It's not like I've made 365 FNAF videos on my own. Oh wait, this is the 366th. Not even kidding. I counted. I'm being legit. Like, this is my 366th FNAF video. And at 6, Imposter. Sus. Some thoroughly believe that this Burntrap animatronic, this new version of the Spring Bonnie animatronic, to not be William Afton, and instead possibly Henry Emily, William's business partner and the father of his first victim. Why do they think this? No idea. However, I can kind of see why, but it would simply just be due to inconsistencies. Since seemingly the endo for this version of Springtrap also has the same endo as the Glamrock animatronics, or the ones that we see in what is honestly the scariest part of the game. At least they look similar. Since if this was Afton, the endo should technically be the first version of the endoskeleton. My explanation for this is simply because they had to model this endo for the files and they were kind of in a rush to release something after already delaying the game multiple times, so they used just the normal endo that they already had and then added some Springtrap bits onto him. And since he's so destroyed, it's really difficult to determine whether it's the same design as Scraptrap or not, and since Henry was also in the FNAF 6 location, potentially it could have been him. But again, I doubt it. Halfway through into number 5, death. These are the things that I tend to come back to when I'm talking about Mrs. Afton, but really, it's only because that's all we have to theorize about her. The possibility that Mrs. Afton died in a car crash is very possible, yet the idea that she did is so unfounded and really only has grounds in the FNAF music video world, like the original FNAF music video song world, you know? Particularly the Living Tombstones, since this seems to be where this idea originated. Not an animated Minecraft music video like I've been thinking, which honestly kind of shocked me, but either way, there isn't really any real evidence in the game or in any real part of the lore that suggests she died in a car crash. I'd say none that suggests that she died at all, but it's FNAF, so I feel like that's a pretty safe bet. But other than that, there's really no explanation as to what happened to Mrs. Afton, and people still treat what they've seen other people say online as fact without checking it out for themselves. Like, one person believed that the whole music video thing was right, and then they posted it on Reddit, and then one person read that and thought it was canon, and then it just grew from there, and now a load of people believe that this is an idea without even knowing where it came from. It came from a music video, guys. It's not canon. And at 4, Vanessa. In the best ending, there are quite a few confusing moments. The most confusing one, for me at least, is the idea that Gregory would go get ice cream with Vanessa when she's done trying to kill him, because, you know, all of a sudden she has a have been trying to kill you for 6 hours? Why would you do that? Some seem to think that it's because they're related or representing the dead Afton kids. And thanks to MatPat, there's a little more evidence to this theory. The ice cream that Vanessa gets while on the hill in the best ending is very reminiscent of the ice cream cone that lured Elizabeth into Baby's arm grabbing or scooping range, I guess, however you want to say it. I feel like scooping is kind of more accurate considering how we're talking about ice cream here, but hey. There's a cone with ice cream on top, and while it's not the same design, this time around it's mint chocolate chip. I mean, I feel like ice cream in general, we've only seen ice cream these 2 times, so yeah, I feel like it's a good thing. I feel like that's a good comparison. Getting close to the end into number 3, Glamrock Freddy. There's a popular theory going around that once again people are treating as fact. The idea that Glamrock Freddy is possessed by Michael Afton after the FNAF 6 fire. That his soul went on to possess the Freddy animatronics somehow after the place, and he himself burned to a crisp. Since Glamrock Freddy does give off a overprotective big brother vibe, that juxtaposes well with the crying child vibes that Gregory gives off. However, I personally don't really think that this is true, at least for the moment. I'd love for it to be true, but for the sake of devil's advocate, let's think about that. While it would make sense from a literary standpoint, the rules that Scott has established in this universe wouldn't allow for this, because the games and the books have made it seem like Remnant can be burned away with fire. And while this may be false, see William Afton lied to us about Remnant. For more information on that, links in the iCard. Fire would still help in preventing the creation of Remnant. That's the conclusion I came to in that video. Thus preventing Michael from actually creating Remnant and latching onto something, especially something that showed up after a whole mall complex was built on top of where he died. It seems like a bit of a stretch to me. And I'm the guy who swore up and down that Michael was a rebuilt crying child, and I'm saying that this is a leap in logic, alright? I mean, I still think that could be possible, but like less so now, but penultimately, in number 2, the one you should not have killed. I adamantly stand by my stance that crying child is the one you should not have killed. And I know that it goes against what MatPat says, but I truly believe that there is more evidence for this than there is for Cassidy being the one you should not have killed. And MatPat, if you want to talk about it, hit me up. We can figure this out together. We know that crying child dies in 1983, which is the same year that Charlotte ends up dying and possessing the puppet. However, we only know of 7 animatronics that definitely existed at this time. The 4 from sister location that made up Circus Baby's entertainment and rental: Funtime Freddy, Funtime Foxy, Baby, and Ballora, and then possibly Funtime Chica, but that's a whole other thing. Since those are said to be some of the first robots that were made according to the FNAF AR Fast Facts, the Spring Bonnie and Spring Freddy animatronics that are used in FNAF 4's location, and the Freddy used in the location that Charlotte is watching from the outside when she gets killed. There is no clear golden Freddy that crying child could have possessed, not taking into account potentially Fredbear being golden Freddy, but proportions kind of negate that. The other minigames from FNAF 2 don't count as well, since we can't really be sure what year they take place in. And aside from no golden Freddy, there is no animatronic around for crying child to possess when he dies in the hospital, unless William is just the absolutely god-awful, most atrocious father, and the hospital would not have let that happen, just saying. And finally, into number 1, Bonnie. This is an interesting theory from Reddit user Was That the Bite of _87 on the Game Theorist subreddit. The post didn't get much love, but it was certainly interesting. Was That the Bite of 87 asks if the Burntrap animatronic is using the disassembled Bonnie endoskeleton. Quote from the Reddit post: "So I have a theory that Burntrap is using the disassembled Bonnie robot. Let me explain. So you know how Burntrap has an intact animatronic foot even though no other Springtrap or Scraptrap ever had them? Management might have disabled Bonnie, and there could have been a body of a glitch trap infected person in there, which explains the dead rotting corpse, and Afton could have taken over but is weak, which explains why he still needs a recharge station. That is all I have for now." And you know what? This is actually pretty decent, and MatPat also talked about this theory. However, considering how Afton's body is in the robot, I don't even think that he using someone like possessed by a glitch trap, I don't think that he would move his corpse. I feel like that's a bit of a stretch. Like, it wouldn't really be necessary if his consciousness is in glitch trap. And I don't think that any reluctant follower would be willing to move a rotting corpse. You know? Like, if Afton's body wasn't in the robot, I feel like this would be really solid, but even if he has claws, his body being in the suit proves that it's Scraptrap. I feel like it kind of has, because he was shoved full of robot bits. So how is he removed from the suit? I don't get it.
Number 10, appearance. It is possible that Vanessa's appearance could hint at her connection to the Afton family. Many have said that she resembles Elizabeth Afton quite a bit, who appears to have somewhere between blonde and ginger colored colored hair, more like a strawberry blonde in my opinion, and green eyes. Vanessa shares these features and her eyes are a very standout green color. Because of this, we could consider that she might be related to the family in some way, considering she shares that appearance. Does she resemble Elizabeth so closely because perhaps she is her mother? And has Elizabeth been born yet, or are we meeting Vanessa Afton before she was married and had children? Where this takes place in the timeline, or which reality even, obviously plays heavily into helping us lock in our speculations as bona fide facts. But also, that timeline's a mess, so good luck with figuring that out. Number 9. Our hero. Another reason that Vanessa could be related to Afton is that we could see her be taking on the role of another daughter or some other relation. Perhaps she is the twin sister of Elizabeth who lived and who up till now we did not know about. Vanessa does seem to be possibly following a trajectory similar to Michael Afton's as a hero who is aware of the danger around her and who is set out to stop her father's work, put an end to it, and free those who have become his victims. Now, in this case, not necessarily saving her possible other sister, Elizabeth, who's already been freed we believe at this point, but instead the child known as Gregory. However, it is possible that this is just what Scott Cawthon wants us to think, but is setting us up for a huge reveal in terms of Vanessa's true allegiance and identity instead. That good old misdirect. Number 8. Elizabeth Afton. The other theory is that her appearance resembles Elizabeth Afton because she is her, but the reason why we know this isn't true and can be dismissed is that we know her name is Vanessa, not Elizabeth, and we know her age is 23 from a scrapped email found within the code of special delivery. The email lists her as Vanessa A, 23 and working in the security department. Well, it just says security, but I'm assuming it's the security department. That has to be our Vanessa, right? I mean, it would be too strange if it were some bizarre coincidence. Also, Scott loves leaving little Easter eggs for us, so it seems likely that this description is meant to belong to Vanessa from Security Breach, who we see as our security guard. So this would then imply that Vanessa is 23 years old, which means, unless this is some alternate virtual inspired version of Elizabeth recreated in a game, something like we saw in Help Wanted, that she couldn't be Elizabeth, as Elizabeth died when she was young. So we can dismiss that theory that her resemblance means that she is actually Elizabeth somehow and not Elizabeth's mother. Number 7. Robot Elizabeth Afton? I know I just said there is no way that Vanessa could be Elizabeth or be directly connected to her without being her mom, but hey, let's play devil's advocate for a second. After all, if we think back to the timeline and all the hints that a lot of the events in the games took place in possibly like the 70s or the 80s, it seems unlikely that in 2020, where this game seems to take place, Vanessa could be Elizabeth's mom. I mean, when was Elizabeth born? When did she die? It just doesn't really make sense in regards to the already messy timeline, because I can't really figure in how she could be her mom unless that happens after, and it's all very confusing. However, is it possible that Vanessa is Elizabeth somehow reborn? Perhaps like what we saw with Charlie in the books. She was recreated basically as like a robot. Elizabeth in this case could be made by William Afton herself and made to simply appear as human and then be renamed as Vanessa. Or perhaps she is simply a new creation who is a robot made to believe she's William's daughter. Maybe all of his children are actually or were actually robots made to seem like or believe that they were human. Whoa. What? Number 6. Her age. 23 is a very specific number. What does this possible age for Vanessa tell us about the character? Well, if we had a more clear family timeline, well, that would help a lot. Or even information as to if William's children are naturally born of him and potentially his wife, or his lover, or if they were adopted, or what. Who are these children? Where did they come from? These are questions I have. Sadly, we don't really have any of that information. In fact, I don't even really know how old William Afton is at this point, even though I know he's dead. Like, how old would he have been when he died? When was he born? I got a lot of questions there. So we have just a lot of speculation. A lot of fans theorize that if there was a Mrs. Afton, that she possibly died tragically in a car crash. And it does seem that Ballora is based off of someone who was close to William, possibly someone who brought a lot of joy and love into his life who he missed. Is it possible that this person is Vanessa, who maybe met him through a job working working at Freddy Fazbear's Mega Pizzaplex. We don't know as of yet, but it's a possibility. Perhaps we are meeting Vanessa before she becomes William's love or wife, or perhaps just his baby mama. Who knows? Number 5. Vanessa A. In scrapped emails found in Special Delivery, where we also found hints for Vanessa's age based on the area she is listed as working in, we also got a hint as to her last name. Assuming this is the same Vanessa, of course. Her last initial is given to us here as A. Obviously, this has driven fans wild and caused them to believe that yes, she is definitely a member of the Afton family tree. Is Vanessa Afton, however, William's wife, or could she be another relative, another child of his, or possibly his sister or his cousin? Perhaps there is a less direct connection to Michael, Elizabeth, and William here that could also be explored. But either way, Afton begins with an A, and Vanessa's last name likely does as well. I love connect the dots Easter eggs like this. I need like a connect the dots FNAF book, and it's just like a bunch of random hints that we've gotten of things, and you have to try to be like, how do these all connect to each other? Someone make me a book like that. I will buy it. Number 4. Vanny. Many have theorized that Vanny and Vanessa are indeed the same person, and we have scrapped and hidden emails from Special Delivery to prove it. There are a few emails addressed to Ness, or Nessie97 as she is known, that imply Ness works for the company. It is believed based on the content of the emails that Ness is indeed Vanny, and we can theorize through these similar names that the two characters are actually one and the same. Perhaps different personas belonging to the same person. One of which is infected perhaps with the virus from William Afton, which has her possessed by Glitchtrap, making her kind of like the new Glitchtrap, if you will. Or perhaps her participation is more willfully involved than we suspect. I mean, just because she was referred to as a reluctant follower doesn't mean that she's still one now. Either way, Ness's username of Nessie97 could imply that Ness was born in 1997, as people often use their birth year in usernames to more easily identify themselves and for, memorization purposes, because you usually don't forget what year you were born. If Ness was born in 1997, this would mean by the year 2020 that she would be 23 years old. What? Especially if this game takes place, I think, after September, which I think is her birth month. That's also in the emails. If she is 23, this would match the age that was given to Vanessa A's records in the other scrapped emails. Connect the dots, FNAF edition. Number 3. The new antagonist. Vanessa is also believed to be an Afton because if she is Vanny, she has some murderous tendencies for sure. I mean, she certainly appears menacing and dangerous in the trailer, and once again we also have evidence from the scrapped emails of Special Delivery to back up her sinister presence and possibly plots. It's said that a virus was moved into some sort of programming using a false credential which allows those using the credentials to override security protocols on animatronics. Uh-oh. It's also implied that Ness could be the culprit, although her fellow colleague is willing to believe that it wasn't her. Please. I don't know why I laughed at that, but Louis just cracks me up in these emails. He's so needy, and he's so like, please date me, I'm Louis. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Louis, take a hint. I don't think Ness is interested. I'm sorry. We also know that Ness has been buying human-like face masks and has ordered fabric, possibly to build her bunny costume. Number 2. Heir of Afton. Because of Vanny's menacing presence, who many believe to be Vanessa A, or in these emails V_A, another persona just to add to her long lists, we can also find another connection here to the Afton name in the role that the character plays. Vanessa could actually be an active participant in this plot who is only pretending to be a good security guard to lure in her prey more easily, which would make sense given what we know of the games and how victims are usually ensnared or entrapped in such a manner in the stories told there. Because of this method, it is possible that Vanessa could actually be the heir of William Afton and either be taking up his last name in honor of him, and maybe she's not directly related, or she could actually be a relative of his, a daughter who has taken up the role of carrying on her father's vision, taking his place as the resident mass murderer of the Freddy Fazbear franchise. Number 1. Animatronic Master. Like a puppet master, you know? There are also theories that Vanessa has gone beyond the villain she aspires to be in terms of her capabilities, not just setting the animatronics loose on innocent victims and altering their safety settings, but in fact manipulating and controlling them remotely, including Vanny. Something that Vanessa could be an Afton who aspires to be even greater than the person she reluctantly serves, and controls Vanny from afar, not appearing as her. Now, this would also protect her sort of like seeming innocence as well, so pretty smart. People have cited Vanny's jump scare and glowing red eyes as evidence, as well as her constant references to glitching out, implying that if we are in the physical world, that Vanny is actually a robot or animatronic controlled, perhaps even built, by successor Vanessa Afton. Number 10. Mrs. Afton's appearance. What does Mrs. Afton look like anyways? Well, we don't really know for sure, but many have theorized that she would resemble her daughter Elizabeth, and that Elizabeth's distinct features such as her bright colored hair and her green eyes actually come from Mrs. Afton. But of course, while this is a good working theory for Mrs. Afton's appearance, it should be noted that, not all of your genetic appearance actually comes from your family in such a manner. In fact, while perhaps more unlikely, it is possible you could resemble someone in your family from previous generations. So it is possible that Elizabeth looks more like, her grandmother or her aunt than her own direct mother. And if that's the case, then we really have no idea what Mrs. Afton looks like, which means she could show up in the story of FNAF at any time, and we might not even recognize her. Number 9. Mrs. Afton is a robot. Is Mrs. Afton even a person? Is she real? How do we know for certain? Here's the thing. We don't. As far as we know, she could not even be human. Mrs. Afton and the entire Afton family could all be lifelike humanoid animatronics made by William Afton. So here's the thing, there isn't actually a ton of evidence to support this theory for Mrs. Afton, but we do have some evidence that suggests that the kids, or at least Michael Afton, could be a robot. After all, it would help to explain how he survived being scooped even after he didn't have any insides anymore and he vomited up all of the animatronics within him. So while we haven't really seen Mrs. Afton yet, it is possible that she was merely an animatronic that William made to act as a mother to his children, and that in the end she was not killed or even left him, but instead either escaped or was dismantled by him. What do you think? And friends, before we move on to the next spot on this list, be sure to do all the things like, comment, subscribe. Every time you click like, another FNAF clue is uncovered. It's true. We get a step closer to solving these mysteries every time you click like. Number 8. There is no Mrs. Afton. Never mind the question of whether or not Mrs. Afton is even human, how about, does she even exist? Huh? I suspect the answer to this question could be that she does not exist. After all, the main reason we believe that she does exist is because of William Afton's children. I mean, they must have a mother, right? That's what we all think. But what if they don't have a mother? What if in fact they are themselves animatronics? Then they wouldn't need a mother, yeah? We don't have any super definitive evidence as to Mrs. Afton's existence anyways. All we have is a lot of symbolism and the presence of her potential children to imply that she does exist, or at least did exist at some point. Number 7. Mrs. Afton is not the mother, or more specifically, not the mother to all of William Afton's children. We don't really know at this point if she's even the mother to any of his children, though we assume, because we assume these are biological children, that they must have a mother. It is possible that Mrs. Afton left William after the death of Elizabeth, and that Elizabeth was not the last child to be born. We believe that Foxy Bro, aka Michael Afton, is the older brother to Crying Child, who does not yet have a confirmed name but could be called Evan based on information gathered from the 6th Fazbear Frights book story, The Real Jake. But we don't really even know for sure about this, and we don't really know when Elizabeth was born. Though I have always assumed she was born sometime after Michael, but she could be the oldest sibling who perhaps even died before Michael was born. Who knows? All I'm saying is, with William being painted as such a sinister figure, it seems unlikely that he would be able to keep a partner around to have 3 children with, especially with him being painted as a distant or perhaps even irresponsible father. So not only is he like, a murderer, but he's also someone that just wasn't around. So I feel like, how do you even keep a partner when that's your life? I don't know. Maybe he has many other skills, like maybe he's like a really good cook or something. I don't know, what would William Afton's dating resume look like? That's what I want to know. I want to know his dating profile. Number 6. Mrs. Afton died in a car crash. This is a theory that many people actually have clung to throughout the development of the franchise and evolution of the lore, despite the fact that we have no evidence to support this theory. I just want to be clear, I don't think there's any evidence to support this theory. However, it's a popular headcanon that has been continuously supported by fans who just are fans of the idea and this tragic fate, I suppose, for Mrs. Afton. The idea seems to have come from a FNAF song and music video for It's Been So Long by The Living Tombstone that seems to be focused on the perspective of Mrs. Afton. In the song, Mrs. Afton talks about regretting abandoning her children and leaving them behind. She sings that she can't wait for the cliff at the end of the river, implying that she took her own life driving off a cliff or potentially throwing herself off of one after the guilt of her children's fate, and possibly the guilt that she feels for William's actions and his other victims. Number 5. Mrs. Afton is Vanessa. I mean, at this point, I'm not as sure about this theory, but it basically is founded on emails discovered in the FNAF mobile AR game Special Delivery. Here there is a user by the name of Ness that many believe is actually a stand-in for Vanessa, while one of her co-workers seems to really like Vanessa, possibly developing romantic feelings for her. It is revealed that she has flowers delivered to her by someone assumed to be her boyfriend. This potential boyfriend is not named William or even Bill, which is sometimes a short form for William, but some still think this could be William Afton just using an alias, and that Vanessa may be the wife and mother of his children that we've been looking for. She could have met William while working for the Freddy Fazbear franchise, and also be the same Vanessa who is working as a security guard in Security Breach, as this Ness also gets transferred to the security department. See what I'm saying? That would likely have to mean, however, that Security Breach is a prequel game, not a sequel set in the present day, as we've kind of been led to believe thus far. So this theory has merit, but is a little rocky overall, because yeah, there's lots of contradictions in it. Still, if it happened, I'd go with it. I could accept it as facts. Number 4. Mrs. Afton is Delilah. Delilah is a character who appeared in the Fazbear Frights book and story titled 1:35 AM. In this story, Delilah is a divorced woman who has always dreamt of having the perfect child, and while out shopping she finds a doll that perfectly matches the child that she had pictured in her mind. The doll even has a name similar to the one she had intended to pick for her own child. Ella. That's the name of the doll, not the perfect name for her child, but it's close enough, so she's like, I'm into this. She buys the doll, but its alarm clock feature malfunctions, and after tossing the doll out because of this, it continues to haunt her. Some think that Delilah could be a stand-in for Mrs. Afton, who perhaps divorced William, but tossed out any ties to him, and this was her doom. Or perhaps he himself employed animatronics she had taken possession of following the divorce to torment her, thereby causing her to go insane and eventually die like Delilah does in the story, dying herself in a vent from exhaustion. Number 3. Mrs. Afton died in a vent. Based on the previous theory, people have also interpreted Delilah's symbolism for Mrs. Afton in a more literal sense. And if Delilah is actually Delilah Afton, I don't know if that would actually be her name. I guess if we're going literally though, we're gonna say Delilah Afton. Then her death in the vent from exhaustion would also be the death of Mrs. Afton, because she is Mrs. Afton. Man, what a way to go, by the way. There is of course the link from Sister Location, where Hand Unit tells you the story of someone being found dead in the vents. Fans have connected these two dots together, assuming that this is what the Fazbear Frights story 1:35 AM is also referring back to with its vent death. If that is true, it would mean that Mrs. Afton, aka Delilah, actually died at Sister Location, or what would become Sister Location, as the building was under construction at the time of her death. Now, in order for us to believe this, we'd kind of have to dismiss some facts. What are those facts? Well, we already know other maintenance workers died in Sister Location, which could mean the person found in the vent more likely was one of those people, but just earlier on, obviously before we got there. Or whoever was doing the protagonist's job previously could have also died in the vents, because, you know, who was doing our job before we get there? Did they quit or did they die? Also, in 1:35 AM, the building that Delilah is drawn to and dies in the vents of is above ground, whereas Sister Location we know is an underground facility. So there's that to consider. Number 2. The search for Mrs. Afton. What if in Sister Location you aren't actually looking for Elizabeth, but instead, you're meant to be looking for your mother. What if you came to the facility knowing somehow that your mother had disappeared there? Perhaps Mrs. Afton went to seek out William to tell him she was leaving him for all of the pain that he had caused her, and because of the death of Elizabeth, or because she was just led to believe that Elizabeth went missing. She was like, I think this is suspicious, so I'm gonna leave you. Not willing to let her go, perhaps William killed her and put her soul within Ballora, and you are actually there to find and free your mother. Along the way you find out the truth about Elizabeth and I guess seek to free her too, which sort of you end up doing, but not in the way that you intended, as Circus Baby and Ballora are still bonded to the souls of your family members, your sister and your mother respectively. Number 1. Mrs. Afton is Clara. In the FNAF game sister location, we get to watch soap opera episodes as the protagonist of the game every time we successfully complete a shift, which personally is one of my favorite things in that game. The episodes that we watch are from a show called The Immortal and the Restless, which centers around a couple, Vlad and Clara. Vlad is a vampire and Clara is a human. Clara is convinced that the child that she has is Vlad's, but Vlad seems to refuse to take any responsibility for this child. He claims it is not actually his, despite the fact that the child seems to already be developing vampiric mannerisms, if you will. Many believe, due to Clara's resemblance to Elizabeth Afton, that she is meant to be a stand-in for William's wife and Elizabeth's mother. You'll notice that Vlad wears purple, like the purple guy, William Afton, and Clara wears green, actually matching Elizabeth's eye color, so there's some color themes going on here, and I feel like Scott Cawthon loves color themes, so we can definitely read into this. If this is true, it could imply that the two were actually separated when their first child was born and had a rocky relationship, with William refusing to step up and accept responsibility as a parent, and Mrs. Afton unhappy for most of their marriage. And it's possible that instead of them actually being married, they were just in a relationship when Mrs. Afton, whatever her first name is, became pregnant with their child. I guess we could go with her first name here being Clara if we're going literally again. I don't know. I feel like her name's gonna be something totally not any of these things. It's gonna be like, I don't know. What's a random name? Geraldine. Geraldine Afton. It's not a theory, it's just what I would love to hear. So Scott, if you're watching this, maybe we can have her be Geraldine Afton. Thank you.
In at 10, kids. Now this one is at the top because I know some people would be mad if it didn't make an appearance at all, however this theory has since been disproven. The idea that Afton started killing because he lost his children seems like a reasonable excuse to go on a killing spree, however we know that he designed the Funtime animatronics with their deadly capabilities in mind, since Elizabeth bites the dust thanks to the baby animatronic before her brother bites it in 1983, the same year that William killed Charlotte. So the animatronics were designed for killing before the original missing children's incident of 1985. Plus, he could have very well killed Charlotte before crying child kicked the animatronic bucket. So it's impossible that William wanted to kill after his kids died or because his kids died, since their deaths are a direct result of him wanting to kill. You don't build robots with giant claws and storage tanks that are the perfect size for a kid and have an animatronic lure them in with ice cream by accident. In at 9, tragic origin. There could also be more of a backstory to this character. Maybe he isn't a guy who just snapped one day. Maybe he was the product of a horrible household. Maybe he dealt with from family or in relationships that pushed him to be this kind of person. And honestly, if that is the intended William Afton backstory, that's terrifying. And while serial killers are unfortunately a reality, those that cause their victims to possess robots and then get possessed themselves so that they can only die through fire aren't really all that common in our world. But the existence of the possibility that Afton was inspired by real events that Scott read or heard about implies that there could be a real William Afton running around our world. And until Scott gives up his inspiration, if any, we're gonna be terrified about that. In at 8, buyout. This could also be about business, however. William could have wanted to take control over Fazbear Entertainment, and could not have had the money to buy Henry out or activate the shotgun clause in their contract. A shotgun clause being a special provision in a partnership contract used to force a partner to sell their stake in the company or buy out the other partner, basically forcing one of them out of the company. They exchange offers until basically one of them bows out, so that William, in this case, would be alone. William may know that Henry has enough money to reject a shotgun offer and counter, forcing William to leave, so killing the missing kids could have been a way to get Henry to consider leaving. And when that didn't work, he moved on to Henry's daughter Charlotte, who possessed the puppet and made everything more complicated. Or at least he did it to get him to want to leave to begin with. Henry eventually did end up leaving, since we see in FNAF World that Baby kills Henry in that game, and since she was also present in the FNAF 6 location, maybe that story still remains true. And at 7, furry. I've joked multiple times about how Afton must be a furry based on his fascination with animatronic suits, even going so far as to corrupt the Glitch Trap character specifically from FNAF VR and make Vanny wear a bunny suit. But what if it's actually true? I mean, yes, the security breach game was called Fury's Rage, but Scott made it a point to clarify that it wasn't Furry's Rage. That seems to me like he doth protest too much. Like, what other explanation is there? Vanny is a new killer, but Afton made her wear a bunny suit which already ties her to him. So what's the point of that if not to actively make a point? The man has a thing for rabbits. I don't know if it was Jessica Rabbit or maybe he ended up watching Space Jam too many times, but Afton has got to be a furry. And this could be the reason that he might have been ostracized and turned into a crazy psychotic killer that targets the same demographic that made fun of him in the first place. Luckily, this guy didn't play Pokemon Diamond, otherwise he'd be too happy to see Lopunny. And at 6, caught. There are plenty of reasons William could have started killing. He's a smart and proficient killer at this point, but have we considered the fact that he wasn't always the killer we know? Everyone has to start somewhere. So what if after doing some form of illegal or killer-like activity, he was caught and then had to take his first human life? He could have found Susie's dog on the street and then been caught by her, thus making him need to kill her too. It goes slightly against the story we've come to think, since we assume that he used her dog as a way to lure her to the back rooms and then put her in the Chica suit, but there has to be something more here that we're missing. He could have been caught by her parents maybe and had to kill them, but realized adults put up too much of a fight. Or maybe he was caught torturing the dog by his wife, who he then had to kill, driving him further down the rabbit hole, pun intended. Everything is a possibility until we know the truth. Halfway through, and at number 5, annoying. Look, I'm gonna give it to you straight. Kids are annoying. I don't care if you are a kid, if you have kids, it doesn't matter, kids are annoying as hell. There are these kids who play soccer in the hallway of my old apartment building who had ruined multiple recordings multiple times when I was working from home. Even when they and their parents are told that they aren't allowed to do that, they still let their kids play in the goddamn hall. Soccer, scooters, any form of ball, basketballs, Nerf guns, you name it, they're using it. Hell, I honestly don't blame William at that point. Hell, if we were to go back into a stay-at-home order and somehow those kids had followed me to my new building and I had to deal with those creatures again, you'll have to start calling me the purple guy, even more than you already do. And now that I've said that, I am obligated to bring back the ongoing joke that I have a feeling this video is going to get used as evidence in any court cases that I'm a part of in the future. Afton could have been pushed to the brink by all the screaming children at Freddy's and then just wanted some goddamn peace and quiet. Then it just escalated from there. But alas, we will never know. Although, this one, I'd understand, buddy. And at 4, deal with the devil. This could be literal or metaphorical. William could literally have made a deal with some form of demon that required him to kill someone or even kill kids specifically. And considering how there are ghosts and how people can be possessed and robots can be possessed, we can't put aside the fact that there might be a devil. Or it could have been a metaphorical deal, knowing that an incident like the missing children's incident would result in the business getting more news coverage, and all the kids who were into horror would want to go there. Because no matter how bad of an idea it would be, I still see comments to this day saying that you would live to go to a Freddy Fazbear location. Even if all the games were true, you would still love to go, so you can die there. Are you serious? Bro. Putting the deep-seated problems of the comment section aside, if Afton made a deal with the devil, it could also be another explanation as to how he was able to survive for so long when he should have died. I mean, I know he was possessed by the one you should not have killed, but maybe he was possessed by them because Lucifer willed it so. Or maybe the devil was just impressed and knew that William would be challenging his throne when he came down. So when he was going to die, Lucifer made sure that he couldn't for a while, to solidify his rule in a sense. Getting close to the end, and at number 3, purple in training. Now, there is another dark idea that came to me that could explain what happens in these games. However unlikely, I still think that it's something worth talking about, or at the very least something my sadistic ass wanted to talk about. What if William was training his kids to be just like him? in like a Black Widow Red Room kind of sense, but instead I guess it would be a purple room? Considering Afton's seemingly lack of remorse about the deaths of those around him, until, I guess, crying child seemingly, I wouldn't put it past Afton to have this kind of training program to make his kids, whether he wanted them or not, to be just like him. Maybe this is what his father did to him, or maybe it's some sort of twisted family tradition, but then they went off the rails and he had to deal with them. I mean, telling your kid not to go near their favorite animatronic when you seemingly made it to look like her and then allowed it to dispense her ice cream seems kinda mega ultra sus to me. Like, why? Why did you think that would work? Why? Penultimately, in at number 2, payback. The idea of payback has never really been explored, and there's no evidence that this is the reason, and it's all pure speculation, but it's still fun to talk about. What if Susie was the child of someone who did him wrong? Maybe William and his wife were in a car accident and she died, and the one driving was Susie's parents. So he took from them what they took from him, someone he loved, an eye for an eye. Or he could have even mistaked Susie for another child, and Cassidy was the one that he wanted to get revenge on. But they were at the same party and Susie walked in with Cassidy's parents or something. There are a lot of unknown variables out there, and I'm only proposing a few ideas, but revenge is always a motive for murder. And as I said, an eye for an eye, or a life for a life in this case. That one wrong could have caused countless of innocent lives and so much pain and suffering. Hell, he may have wanted to get revenge on Henry, so he killed his daughter and then killed a whole load of kids so that the business would get shut down and he would get to watch him suffer even more after he had already taken his daughter from him. And finally, in at number 1, just for fun. I think the scariest thing of all would be if William just decided he'd start offing kids for the hell of it, because he got bored or because his marriage was dull. I don't know how it would really start or what the trigger would be for, oh, I should kill kids, but we know that he had this plan from basically the start, since the fast facts revealed that the Funtime animatronics were among some of the first ones that Afton made, and that they were designed with the whole claw mechanism and containment chamber in mind. However, the fast facts claim that these were to store items. So, who knows? This could have been a plan all along. He could just be going after kids because it's fun, or he's sort of hunting them for sport in a way, or because they were an easier target. Which could be the case given how he didn't kill Henry when he was clearly the only thing stopping him from achieving everything he wanted. He could have just wanted to choose kids because they're pure and innocent. Or maybe he thought that these specific ones were sinners, like the Black Hood from season 2 of Riverdale, the last good Riverdale season. In at 10, bullying. Not talking about what it led to, but specifically the tormenting of the younger brother. While common among siblings, especially in media, this is just damn cruel. I mean, like, even Roderick wouldn't have ripped off one of Greg's plushy heads and then tormented him with it. So the bullying here is a damn shame. And honestly, the fact that William did nothing to reprimand his son for tormenting his other son only makes this worse, I'm sure. Which eventually caused him to escalate, and essentially escalate so much that, well, we all know what happened. But even without that, brothers who torment their younger brothers like that are cruel. Like, I tormented my sister, but I didn't like destroy her stuff so I could use it as a mask to then scare her even more. And I'm sure that he doesn't like just wear it to scare a crying child either. He probably just walks around with it on the regular just to make his younger brother mad, since, you know, he's wearing your stuffed animal's face. And at 9, encouraging Gregory. Assuming that Glamrock Freddy is possessed by Michael, even if I don't think it's likely, Michael, as Glamrock Freddy, straight up encourages Gregory to risk his life in order to get out of the Pizzaplex, when in all honesty, the safest thing to do would be to just keep him either in your stomach or in your green room until 6 AM, especially after the doors closed and he was definitely stuck. There was no need for this daycare, secret escape, hatch escape plan thing, okay? You could have just gone back the way you came and everything would have been fine. You would not have been suspicious, since you'd have at least appeared like you listened to Vanessa and went back to your green room, and then Gregory would have been safe, especially after you knew that there was a crazy bunny running around looking to slaughter people. So yeah, if Glamrock Freddy is possessed by Michael, he did a horrible job at protecting his surrogate younger brother, which kinda hurts the whole he protects Gregory because of crying child thing, doesn't it? And at 8, listen to his father. Now, this takes a bit of assuming, but less than assuming that Glam Freddy is possessed, so it's gonna be a spot higher. We learn in Michael's final speech in Sister Location that he went to find his sister because his father asked him to, saying something along the lines of, I did it, I put her back together, just like you asked me to, which is yes in reference to Baby, but the issue I have with this is why did he listen to his father? I don't think he learned about the horrible things his father did because of Baby. Like, I think he must have learned about it beforehand, maybe when he got Crying Child killed since he was freaking out because the animatronic jaw should not have been able to crush his skull. And even if he didn't know about what William was doing, honestly that could make this point even worse. Like, what other things did William ask his son to do, either while he was stuck in Fazbear's Fright or before that Michael did without question? That's a thought that really worries me, and maybe Michael has more to repent for than just hurting his brother. And it's 7, Bad Babysitter. Now, while we don't know the details about what's going on inside the Midnight Motorist minigame, although I think we kind of figured it out, link to that video is in the iCard, I think it's safe to say that this is the Afton family, and particularly the Afton males. Seemingly, Michael was babysitting Crying Child while their father was at work, but Michael was just watching TV and not his little brother, which allowed his little bro to break his window and go to the pizza place yet again, which I'm sure made his father so angry that when he got his son back home, he wasn't the nice father I'm sure he pretends to be. So Michael's negligence ended up getting his little brother in trouble and God knows what else, because all he wanted to do was watch his show, which is possibly Immortal and the Restless. Which makes this even worse because it's a fucking soap opera. And before any of you get mad at me and tell me that this isn't freaking Michael, okay? The one who tells William to go easy on Crying Child is most definitely Michael and not William's wife, since this is after William started killing, so his wife was gone. Plus, it's the same gray shirt that Michael wears at like literally all the time, and he's in front of the same TV that we sit in front of in Sister Location. That's about as clear cut as the series gets. And it's 6, Walking Corpse. Now, Sister Location also ends with a scene of Michael walking around town literally purple and smelling god awful. Some see this as his body rotting thanks to the animatronic parts inside him. I like to think that it's because the robotic parts inside him are beating up his inside so much that it's causing severe bruising, because never have I once seen a decaying body be shown as purple in color. Every version of rotting corpses, especially like living corpses, with zombies being the most common example when rotting, are shown as green in cartoons, like Minecraft zombies for instance, or Plants vs. Zombies. So the purple in reality just can't be decay, because it just doesn't work, it doesn't make sense. But if it is the case, walking around in public smelling like that is a crime in and of itself. Holy crap. And if it's not the case, this man obviously hasn't showered in ages, and whether that's due to a personal choice or the choice of the animatronics inside him, damn, it's still a horrifying mistake. A damn shame is what it is. Halfway through into number 5, Burning. FNAF 6 is a pretty good game. It was something new and probably the most interactive FNAF game we've ever had since we got to make our own pizzeria. But the ending, while good and one of the most iconic speeches of all time, Michael letting himself go up in flames as well as the whole pizzeria is seriously dumb on his part. Like, bro, you've seen your father come back to life just as many times as anyone else. Like, at least keep kicking around for another year or two to make sure he's actually dead instead of just hoping he is. You know that this man is as relentless as Taco Bell after a night of binge drinking, yet you let it go. Just think about things. I wish for once one person in this series would actually think something through. And Henry encouraging him to stay just also seems like a bad idea to me. Straight up. Like, I get that you want nobody to remember this, but unless you've killed the parents of all the victims or everyone who's ever covered the story in the media, people are always going to remember this. So just stay alive, okay? Make sure the story is over, and then you can off yourself. Both Michael and Henry, honestly. God. And at 4, Animatronic Escape. Going to investigate a secret underground facility when your homicidal maniac of a father asks you to is one thing. It's another thing when you become the vessel through which 5 separate animatronics escape into the outside world to begin wreaking havoc. Like, sure, you couldn't really help it, but the canon ending to the game is seemingly the one where you listen to Baby and then end up getting scooped. So in actuality, Michael was being just a big old dum-dum here. After everything, you should know that the possessed animatronics, even if they are possessed by your sister, are a bad idea, especially if you've been through the other locations already and have been attacked by those very same haunted animatronics. Have you never seen an episode of Supernatural? Like, every spirit is a vengeful spirit after this long, bro. Come on. Just salt and burn the animatronic and then go home. Wait, could the whole, like, Remnant needs to burn thing be referenced to Supernatural? I hope so. Getting close to the end, and in number 3 left his sister. Now, don't get me wrong. Allowing yourself to be a vessel for a group of evil bags is one thing. I really felt like Dean Winchester there for a minute. But the other ending doesn't actually let Michael off the hook either. In the other ending, the non-canon one, I'm guessing, where Ennard attacks you while you're watching Immortal and the Restless, you end up actually leaving your sister in the underground storage facility for dead. Well, not for dead since she's already possessing an animatronic, but you know what I mean. You didn't even try to set her free. And assuming that that's what you did in the previous games, you already know how to set them free. So like, why didn't you set your sister free? Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, my sister and I, we don't always see eye to eye. Sometimes she can't take my hilarious jokes and my brilliant sense of humor, but I'd still release her soul if it was trapped inside a 6-foot tall giant robot. Okay, I would. But this man just leaves. And we know that he knows it's Elizabeth. He just doesn't care. What a great big brother this guy is. You already screwed over one sibling, why not the other one too, right? Speaking of which, and ultimately, in at number 2, Chomp. I think we all know that Michael is certainly at least partially responsible for the bite of 83. Because while William did superpower the Fredbear jaw, if Michael hadn't put his brother's head in the mouth, it wouldn't have mattered. While yes, he thought that he'd be safe because it's an animatronic mouth, how bad can it really be? He still definitely contributed to Crying Child's death. It's interesting the way that like fate works. In this instance, we can really blame anyone for the death of Crying Child, because I am absolutely certain at the very least Michael blamed himself at the beginning. After learning what William was up to and what he did to the animatronic, maybe the guilt lifted slightly, but all that it would really do was assure himself that he didn't have the intention on killing his brother. But either way, without him, nobody would have put his head in the animatronic mouth. But yeah, getting your little bro chomped is definitely gonna cause some friction among the family members. Especially when, because of that, you're the only 2 family members left. And finally, and at number 1, nothing. Michael Afton's biggest sin in my mind is his ability to do nothing. Like, sure, he seems to be playing the good guy, going after his father and trying to undo his deeds, but really, Michael to me just seems like he's been playing hero this whole time while not actually doing anything. Sure, he says he's trying to right his father's wrongs and whatnot, but looking at him, he's not doing it because he's a good person. He seems to be doing it because he just feels bad and not because of some higher moral code. He blames himself for getting his brother killed, which subsequently means that anything he does to try and fix that is just to make himself feel better about it, because in the end, nothing's gonna bring his little brother back. And if anything, the FNAF 3 Happiest Day minigame is because of Henry, not Michael. And you know what? This guy, he doesn't have the balls to actually end his father once and for all. He says that he's gonna go come find him in the final scene of Sister Location, but then when he does, he's not the one to burn the place down, okay? Henry's the one who does that. Henry is the only one who's able to actually sack up and do anything about this. I mean, he does it in a horribly stupid way, but he still at least does something. If Michael really wanted to make sure that William was stopped, like I said earlier in the list, he wouldn't have let himself burn. He would have stayed alive, made sure that his dad was dead, made sure that his old man had kicked the animatronic-filled bucket, and then offed himself. But he lets himself burn so that he won't have to deal with knowing what his father did and live with the regret of hurting his brother. So, yeah, he didn't really do anything.